Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Peptide PhDs podcast. I am Alan Jones.
And I'm Mark Bartlett. That is Dr. Jones and Dr. Bartlett. We are the Peptide PhDs. This is where we have a lot of fun for an hour or so talking about everything related to peptides and things that are peripheral to peptides, right? We don't always just nag about peptides, but health and wellness are interrelated. So we're super excited to talk tonight. We will mention peptides, but we are going to be talking about the fourth pillar of health. Right, Dr. Jones?
Yes, sir. I tell you, we've spent time talking about the first three pillars, right? Diet. We talked about exercise. We talked about sleep. Well, tonight we get to talk about the fourth pillar, the mind-body loop. And I'm excited about this, Dr. Mark, because I think it's the one that we overlook the most.
Yes, this mind-body loop. So, and just to sort of demonstrate that, let's sort of ask you guys from the audience, and thank you for being here, the live audience. We love it because we get all your comments. We don't hear you, but we see your little comments as you write them on the screen here, and we're monitoring those, trying to, multitask here. But we'll ask you some simple questions. What is, sort of as we get to this, we've talked about three pillars of health. So what does health actually mean to you? Sort of how do you define your health?
Yeah, Dr. Mark, for me, that's a really interesting question. And I define it from a couple of different ways. And I have to say, probably the first thing, and really over the last 4 or 5 years, this has been the biggest thing for me that has been the defining moment of health as I began to get into my older ages. And that was watching my dad die. And when I watched him die of this disease called sarcopenia, and the way that he died and the way that it impacted his life so negatively, and how much pain he was in, and just this downhill spiral that just literally took him from being a really, really strong, just tough man
Your
to
dad, his name was Gary, right?
his name was Gary. That's correct.
I don't know if you guys in the audience know this, and I hope you don't mind me saying, Alan, I've got a picture of his that I'm almost ready to frame and put on the wall. He's riding this bull, and it looks like a mean bull. And your dad's not a big guy like you are. He's a pretty slender dude. And
Yep.
he had a look of determination on his face, but also a look of pure joy on his face, because that bull was like 8 feet in the air and he was hanging onto that thing like a
Yeah.
pro. Like
Yeah.
when
And,
he
and
was healthy, he was amazing, right? And he was also a
yeah,
boxer, wasn't he?
he was a boxer. Actually, back in the early 60s, he actually went to college on a boxing scholarship. And I mean, he was a good boxer.
Yeah.
And so, knowing that, of course, I wasn't alive back then. I wasn't alive and didn't come along until 67. But, this was the man that raised me and grew me up and had me boxing at 5, and I boxed from 5 until 16. But he was the role model for me and my two brothers as far as just growing up. And we grew up hard. And there's no doubt about it. We did not have an easy life. We worked our tails off, worked on a farm, worked cattle. I mean, we did all of that stuff. And it was because of him. But later on in my life, I saw this strong, tough, he was just, to me, he was just a strong pound for pound, probably the strongest person I've ever met in my life, right? Even though he was a smaller man, to when he died, he was 85 pounds and laying in a hospital bed and literally had shriveled up to nothing. And so when I saw that, I was like, I got to do something about this. This is crap. There's no person on earth that deserves to die like that. And so it just lit a fire in me. And I knew from that point forward that I was going to study this disease, that no doctor knew about it. No nutritionist knew about it. They didn't know how to do anything for this man. And so I dedicated my life to it. And that became what health is for me. And if I look at that today, Dr. Mark, I'm sitting here at 58. I want to be able to provide financially and protectively for my wife and my family. I've got a new granddaughter that's going to be born in April. I want her 30 years from now to see a strong big paw. I don't want to be Big Paw in the hospital like my son saw my dad in those last days. I want to be big and strong, and that's the way I want my grandkids to remember me, not in some nursing home somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's what it is for me.
I love how you've turned that around, Dr. Jones, like seeing that and then motivating yourself to be sort of more educated and actually have more credibility in the space, right? You told me personally that,
Exactly.
hey, I wanted to learn about health. I saw health as from your dad, not being frail, right? If I could
Right.
summarize and put words in your mouth, like I don't
Exactly.
like this concept of frailty, even as you get older. And
That's
so
exactly
do something about it. And I'm sure that you relate to those three pillars of health that we've already talked about, right? Like
mhm,
movement, healthy diet, and good sleep that supports both of those things. Um,
exactly.
and we've got some comments here. I love what Carmen said, feeling alive and present. Like that's super
Mm,
important no matter what your
it
age.
is.
And actually, I love what Carmen said because it does tip into what we're going to talk about today, right? We talk about the pillars of health, and a lot of people sort of define health. I know I do. It's all about the physical. And today we're going to cross over into beyond the physical, and that is to that mind-body connection, the mind part of it, and mental health.
Yeah.
And
Well, Dr. Mark, before we go there, I mean, what does health mean to you? I
yeah,
want to hear
well,
your story.
I asked myself that question today because I knew I was going to ask it of our audience, and I got to say, for me, about um, it was about the physical side, pretty much, right? I'm
Mhm.
64 now, a little bit older than you. I'm your senior, Dr. Jones. Um, so
And my mentor.
I'm not racing mountain bikes like I used to, and at least not as easily, but I'm still fighting for that sense of youth and vitality. I don't want to let that youth, vitality, that energy to slip away, right? So I
Mm,
always had a goal. About, I don't know, 30 years ago, I was in sort of in the mountains of Nevada with my wife over near Reno and just walking at a high mountain peak in a snow. What they have a ski resort there. This dude came screaming down the mountain on his mountain bike, and he kind of did this broadside skid right next to us and said, "Hello, folks." And I saw him, and I thought he was an older gentleman. He was about 20 years older than me at the time. And he said, "Yeah, I'm 60 something." I'm like, "Dude, I'm so impressed. You're riding that mountain bike on that like downhill black diamond. I want to be like you." And now I am that age. But a couple of years ago, I was doing a really hard climb in the mountains behind my house. And this guy stopped to let me pass. Now, we're quite a climb. We're like about 1,200, 1,300 feet into this climb. I don't know what the percent grade is, but it's not easy. And this guy stopped and he sort of picked up his mountain bike. Mountain bikes are about 30, 40 pounds. He picked it up and put it on the side there and waited for me to go past. And I went past him and I noticed he was a little older. And then I bumped into his buddies up the trail and they said, "You know, that guy back there is 80 years old?" I'm like, "What the? Okay, now I've got a new goal. By 80, I still want to be climbing that mountain." So, that's me. I just want to sort of, I don't want to act my age. That's my goal. But it's a physical thing. But again, today, let's sort of define this fourth pillar and help
Oh
people
yeah.
understand that in these four pillars of health, there's one that's just not completely physical.
There is, and that's what we're going to talk about it today. We're going to define it, you know, differently from the lens of the body to more about the lens of the mind and the emotions and our mental health and well-being. And so, you got to think, Dr. Mark, when you think about our minds control our body. And it, we, again, kind of in my past, I was part of a neuroscience team that did a lot of research on brain health. And we always talked about strong brain, strong body. And, it's really, really important to have a strong brain. But part of that strong brain really is to have a strong emotional well being, a strong mental health as well. And so, because our brains can break.
Yeah.
And if we're not paying attention to all four of these pillars of health, if we get a broken brain, it doesn't really matter how strong our body is,
Hmm.
And so this part, I'm kind kind of getting out of a little bit of what we've talked about, but it's so important to understand how important this whole mental health is, this whole strong brain component is, because it's incredibly, incredibly important.
Yes,
So
indeed. And we're going to, well, how do you define then? Let's just, Dr. Alan Jones, I think you put it in words really nicely. What is this fourth pillar of health? So the first one that we talked about, we spent an hour
mhm,
talking about nutrition and eating healthy. And we've
yep,
spent some time talking about ultra high processed food and what that does to you, right? We talked about that
we
last
did.
week. The other one was movement. And we talked about peptides that our bodies actually use to communicate. And when you use your muscle, you are expressing the intelligence of your body like you can in no other way almost except for using the
Right.
brain, because the muscle is excreting these myokine peptides and proteins that communicate with the rest of the body. It was a
That's right.
fascinating, well, if I do say so myself, I thought it was a fascinating podcast. The third pillar of health that we talked about was sleep. And we talked about the importance of sleep and even about cleaning your brain and preventing dementia. You know,
Yeah.
Norma here talks about how she's taking care of her mom, who's had dementia for several years. And, I think I had a conversation with a group in Japan one year. I was working for a different company, and we were really focusing on aging healthily. And I had a group of 50-something-year-old, very successful Japanese people in an office in Tokyo. And they said, Dr. Bartlett, the C word was the word that we were all scared of when we were younger. And now many of us are looking after our parents. And it's not the C word anymore, it's the D word. We're really worried about, we're spending time focusing on our parents who are starting to sort of have dementia. And we are so scared that we are going to lose our minds, because it's one thing to have your body, but if you can't sort of appreciate the now, as someone said earlier today, that's a tough thing. So
Yeah.
sleep is the key to one of the very important keys to sort of keeping our brains from dementia. But we're talking about a different pillar of health today. We're talking about mental, but we're sort of talking about now mental, aren't we? About resilience, about resilience to stress and the
Mhm.
everyday sort of stresses.
Yeah. No, we are. And that fourth pillar, if you think about it, it's this whole mental well-being is the pillar that holds all of the other pillars together. Right. And so whether it's your stress or mood or purpose, connection, I mean, all of these things they literally shape our biology. And we don't give it enough merit as to its power to impact our overall well-being. And so, you know, whether it's food, movement, sleep, whether it's peptides, no matter all of those things right there, we've got to have that sharp mind to hold those things together and make sure that everything is communicating right.
Yes.
So,
And so we're going to use the most of the rest of our time with you guys tonight to maybe shed some light on how we can help. We'll define a little bit what that mental health means today,
mhm,
but
mhm.
we'll also try to figure out together maybe some strategies to help strengthen that fourth pillar of health. But first, a disclaimer. Not even brought on by the lawyers, but just something that I want to share with you, right? Dr. Jones,
Yeah.
we are not mental health clinicians, right? But as biologists, we can talk about how the chemistry of well-being starts long before you see a psychiatrist, right? And so we are going to dig into this fascinating new paper. But before we do that, like, any thoughts on that, Dr. Jones?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yes, we're not psychiatrists, and no, we're not trying to you know say that we're going to cure any type of mental health or mental illness or anything like that. I mean, we're literally tying them all together as these four pillars foundation of optimal health. And look, the fact of the matter is, Dr. Mark, that's what Make Wellness is about.
Yes.
Make Wellness is about, and I know that's your philosophy, and that's my philosophy, is how can we educate people to optimize their health so that they can live these ultimate lives that we all dream of living. And there are things that if we don't know, and we're experiencing this with our own employees right now in our Make 3 Breakthrough, right? In our corporate side, we've got employees that really don't understand exercise. They don't understand diet. And so we're teaching the heck out of all of our people right now. And really for me, that's what this is about. And I think that's why this paper is really intriguing into what we're talking about
All right.
today.
Tell us about the paper, because you found another one. Like, this is Dr. Allen's superpower. He's got this, I don't know, some kind of algorithm. I don't know how you do it, but you always find amazing papers and studies. And this is where the peptide PhDs get to piggyback on the years of work that other scientists do that feed
Right.
into this knowledge that we love to teach you guys. So tell us about
Exactly.
this paper that you found.
So this is Cooper et al. 2025, and the title of the paper is "From Surviving to Thriving: How Sleep, Physical Activity, and Diet Shape Well-Being in Young Adults." And
Wouldn't it be great if we could do that study in New Zealand? Oh,
oh my
wait,
gosh,
Jack Cooper is from New Zealand, the
there
University of
he is.
Otago, Dunedin.
Yeah, and I think wasn't University of Rio Grande. Yeah, Brazil as well. That's not a bad place either. I'd like to go to Brazil and New Zealand. I mean, Brazil's great.
Yep, let's do
So
that on our next sabbatical.
absolutely, absolutely. So anyway, the paper, if you looked at it, they looked at over 2,000, which again, great power. They looked over 2,000 young adults across 3 different countries, and they found something really powerful, Dr. Mark, that the single biggest predictor of psychological well-being wasn't exercise or diet, it was sleep quality. And then after sleep quality came fruit and vegetable intake and then physical activity. Now, I'm going to say
Okay, so
something.
they kind of prioritize it, right? They, which I
They,
find really interesting, like, because, okay, like, I don't know how you felt about that, Dr. Allen, because we've always talked about, we have talked about sleep, but I know that you're a muscle physiologist and you would
Mhm.
love to argue that exercise is the best thing because there's a peptide that comes from the muscle called brain-derived neurotropic factor that just
Mhm.
lights up your brain. But it is kind of
Yeah.
interesting to get this other take on it from this study.
Well, let me just point one thing out. You know, they had sleep quality first, which I don't disagree with because I think sleep has to be prioritized. We've overlooked the power of sleep for a long time. But then the second most important predictor were fruit and vegetable intake. Now that's where I have the problem with this paper, honestly, because later on in the paper we're going to talk about what they say about ultra processed foods, right? Highly processed foods. And we'll talk a little, we'll say a little bit about that here in a little while. But here's the problem that I have. Instead of saying fruit and vegetable intake, I believe it should have been whole foods because you cannot discount the importance of a whole food diet. Now, my guess is that fruit and vegetable intake is an indicator that most of those people were eating a good whole foods diet. Okay? And so I would probably argue that fruit and vegetable intake is not the whole story right there. But anyway,
I
and
think
then of
that's a
course
really
the
good
third
point,
thing.
and it's just another way of looking at it. So it's how they worded it, right?
Yep.
And I love that because again, like ultra high processed foods, not the direction. Like, um, if you got food with a label on it, probably, well, at least you need to look at that label very closely. But food without a label, that's what they're talking about right here, right? Fruits and vegetables. And often I say vegetables and fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're exactly right. I'm going to post here in the comments the study so
Ah,
that
good on you.
everybody will have the title to it right there.
It
So
looks like, yeah, good job. You did better than me. I just did a quick title and
yeah.
author.
There you go. All right. So yeah, there's the entire title of the studies, 2025 study, late last year. But anyway, you know, what does make sense biologically from this particular study is that the foods that they talk about are packed with micronutrients and polyphenols and things that can help with inflammation and oxidative stress, and you know, things that actually do get a lot worse when we don't sleep, right? So,
Yeah, this brings up something again, the fruits and vegetables. So you go, okay, well, why are vegetables and fruits so high on the list for cognitive health? Um, I guess it wasn't number one, right? But it's super important. So while we're talking about it, let's just go there.
mhm,
When I was at the National Cancer Institute, I think I've shared this with you guys. Like I was looking at drugs for cancer, working in sort of cancer experimental immunology, and it was clear that a lot of the drugs for cancer and for all sorts of diseases actually were inspired by chemicals from nature. And by chemicals, chemicals, you kind of think, oh, petrochemicals, nasty chemicals, forever chemicals. I'm talking about the ones that nature makes. So I'm going to call them phytochemicals, as in sort of plant chemicals. And we've got a World Health Organization list of vitamins and minerals, right? Where we say, okay, we know that these are essential. We know that you need a certain amount of B1, B2, B3, B5, B12. We know that you need a certain amount of calcium and magnesium and selenium and manganese. These are very well honed sciences, right? Vitamin D is, the average intake that you get is X, and here's how much you should have every day. What's not on the list, interestingly, are all of these phytochemicals. So plants aren't just fiber and color, right? You eat a carrot, you've got carotenoids, beta carotene, alpha carotene. These are carotenoids that actually embed themselves in the membrane of every cell in your body, and they protect your cells from oxidation. They do all sorts of things. When they start to break down and get oxidized, they literally send a signal to the nucleus and affect at what we talked about last week, epigenetics. They tell the nucleus of the cell, the command and the control center, hey, there's some oxidation going on here. So you need to upregulate your production of the endogenous antioxidant enzymes. So the body is incredibly intelligent. The cells are intelligent, and they get messages from the plants, which is ultimately from the sun, right? So it's kind of no wonder they used to worship the sun in the old days, because it's the source of all of our food, energy, power, and to a certain extent, intelligence in our bodies, right? So polyphenols, same kind of thing. They are amazing. In that sense, our food is information for our bodies. So you cannot ignore like the myriad of phytochemicals that are in the vegetables, in the fruits. So it's no wonder here they're seeing that it's a number 2 important thing for health of the brain. And we're talking health now, right? They were doing maybe you're going to unpack that a little later, but I'm pretty sure they were doing sort of wellness questionnaires, validated questionnaires to determine not are you going to get dementia later, but how are you now? How are you feeling? How happy are you with life? Are you depressed? Are you sad? Or are you enjoying the moment?
yeah, no, interesting enough, they actually used in this particular study, they actually used, information from 3 different studies in 3 different countries, like we talked about. But there were a scale called the Diener Flourishing Scale, another scale called the Daily Adapted Flourishing Scale, and then a well-being survey called the WHO-5 Wellbeing Index. So they used 2 scales, or basically 2 questionnaires and a survey. And they were looking at, how people felt. And so, again, like you talked about, the key findings of the study, one of the key findings that I found, and we touched on it. We talked about sleep quality. We talked about fruit and vegetable. We talked about physical activity. But it showed in this particular study that in this age group, 18 to 25-year-olds, in this particular age group, ultra processed food intake kind of showed an inconsistent association with well-being. And they actually showed that it wasn't a reliable predictor, although higher UPF, ultra processed food intake, related to more depression in this age group. So it didn't really take into account the epigenetic impact of ultra processed foods like we discussed last week. So It was more of, okay, when you eat today, how do you feel? When you exercise today, how do you feel? And one of the things that they found with the exercise, Dr. Mark, which was really interesting, I thought, was that it was a very robust predictor of well being on days that people exercised, and not a great predictor when people didn't exercise. How about that one? What does that tell you?
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it?
Hmm.
It says that exercise definitely has an influence. And so you can't take, I feel like this is a great study. And what it did was it sort of put in priority. So sleep is the biggest factor. And then healthy diet, hopefully very low in ultra high processed foods, right? Because they talked about vegetable and fruit consumption. And then exercise.
Yeah.
But what it says to me is sleep on its own is not going to do the trick. Food on its own is not going to do the trick. Those are three very important sort of pillars that sort of support mental health.
Hmm. Yeah. And the other thing it talks about that it says to me is when I look at that physical activity, of course, I always go there, right? The muscle guy. I always got to go to the lifting weights or the exercise. But it says we need to be exercising more than 3 days a week or more than 4 days a week. I mean, we need to exercise or do some type of activity on a regular basis. And I also think that it's an indicator of how important myokines are to our current health and well-being and our ultimate health and well-being later on. And so I don't know. I keep going back to that one thing thinking, man, you got to do something every day. You got to get off your butt. You got to get out of the recliner and you got to get active every day.
Let me, when I was a young man, about 19 years old, I decided to do some volunteer missionary work. And
Mhm.
so I came to the US, and it was around 1980. That's how old I am. And my my task was to work with the Southeast Asian refugees who had recently come to America. They'd been displaced, the Hmong people, the Laotians, Cambodians. So these guys didn't speak English, so I had to learn the language and sort of work with these guys. But before I did all of that, I went to this kind of I guess, a place that prepared me. It was a training center. And we had this really strict but fun physical education teacher. And he was like, you're gonna be stuck in a little apartment somewhere, but you gotta move every day. And he was a religious guy, and he said, exercise is like manna from heaven. You have to do it
Mhm.
every day. And I kind of like that biblical reference because manna, if you remember, was, I don't know whether it was a fungus or something, but the Israelites would wake up in the morning and there'd be manna on the ground.
Mhm.
And you had to eat it that day because if you got greedy and tried to get a whole bunch of it and store it, overnight it would turn to worms and nastiness, right? So was God teaching us something there that, and I feel like that was a perfect thing. Like you just said, Dr. Allen, like every day. And that's what exercise is like. It's like you can't kind of do a lot today and store it up for tomorrow. Not really, I guess, to a certain extent, but let's just keep doing it every day. Don't stop. And when you stop and you lose momentum, it is so hard to start again.
Yeah. I will say that for me personally, when I don't do some kind of exercise, and it could be, as something as simple as 3 or 4 or 5 exercise snacks throughout the day, that's getting some activity in. That's contracting those muscles. That's getting that myokine expression. Or if I get in my gym and I have a good long workout, but when I don't do something like that and I just sit around all day, which rarely happens. I have to be like really, really sick and really, really down to sit all day long. But when that happens, I just feel like that is an absolute wasted day. A
Yeah,
day, I don't care. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is. You've got to do something to be active. Go on a walk, do something,
I
get out in
agree.
nature. So,
Let's break it down a little bit then. Let's summarize again for the folks. Each one of these, like because we're biologists, we want to look at the mechanism, right? So we have
yeah.
three things here. Number one, sleep. Number two, your healthy diet, like real foods. And number
Mhm.
three, exercise. So can we start with sleep and just summarize again? Like, let's look at what we think is the mechanism for each of those things that helps you to be your best resilient self, shall we?
Yeah,
Does that sound like a
absolutely.
good exercise? Let's chat about that for a sec.
Sounds great.
So
Let's do it.
let's start with sleep. For those of you who have listened to our podcast before and you've heard us talk about that pillar, and I'm looking at the chat here, so feel free to post a comment and we'll share it. What is the thing about sleep that you think helps you to be more emotionally resilient the next day or sort of this week or this month? And consistent good sleep habits. What's going on? Refresh our memories, guys. I hope that you've been listening. Previously, you probably know more than the average person about deep sleep and about REM sleep. So I've given you some clues there. What's going on? Why
Yep.
does sleep matter so much to your mental health?
Yep. Well, and let's take the same exercise. Let's do the same exercise for physical activity.
Okay, we're watching your comments, guys. So
Yep.
throw in there your answers. Show us that you're the smartest person in the room. Don't be shy. Yep. And
Yep.
okay, so Alan, the next thing is exercise, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
Yeah.
fruit and vegetables. Fruit and vegetables. Remember what I just
Got it.
said, okay? So throw in your comments here, guys. What's the mechanism of fruit and vegetables versus unhealthy food and being your best mentally resilient person today, lowering
I
your
think we've
stress?
got I think we've got so many comments trying to come through right now that it's blocked. It literally
Yeah.
has locked up the computer.
Okay, I can see Holly's comment. Getting a good
Yeah.
solid sleep helps me get through my day feeling refreshed.
Mhm.
And then I don't see any more comments. So maybe people are just going crazy with the answering there. So maybe we've jammed the system up. Maybe it can't handle the comments. It's not like Zoom, is it? Okay, so sleep. Let me just throw it out there because the comments are getting jammed up. Remember, I'll cover deep sleep and Alan can cover REM. Does that sound fair? We'll just spend a
Absolutely.
minute on each, right? Deep sleep is, remember we talked about how there's this new system just discovered 10 years ago, 2015, where we understand now finally that the brain has its own incredibly efficient cleaning system where the brain shrinks a little bit and the perivascular space, that's the space just around the blood vessels and the arteries and the veins, kind of widens up enough to allow the spinal fluid to push through in waves, push out the day's sort of junk. And doing that actually helps the brain. I think it helps it now, right? It clarifies it. Alan, you mentioned last week, during the day, as you are working, you are chewing up energy, and the energy chemical in the brain is ATP. And when you have completely exhausted ATP and you've squeezed the last amount of energy out of it in the battery that's in your brain, you're left with a molecule called adenosine. That builds up during the day. And adenosine is the reason why you feel tired and why your brain is telling you to sleep, because it binds to this adenosine receptor. That's why we shouldn't have caffeine, because it blocks that receptor between adenosine and the receptor. So there's a good example of how you're going to feel better the next day if you have deep sleep, because it's only during deep sleep that you get this amazing cleansing of the brain.
Yep. So deep sleep is detoxifying the brain.
Yep.
All right.
Well summarized. Now, okay, tell us about REM, because
all right.
we used to think that dreaming was just kind of a fun part of like watching a movie while you sleep. What's going on?
And I have to tell you, this is funny that I'm about to start talking about dreaming, because I wake up with Laura, my wife, this morning, and she's like, "I've had the craziest dreams last night." And she started talking about these ducks coming out of these spider webs, hanging out of trees, and I'm like, "Babe, I have no clue how to interpret that dream, but I'm sure your brain was removing some memory somewhere." I have no idea what it's saying, but anyway, REM sleep. We want to have REM sleep because that is your nighttime therapist. REM sleep is how your body kind of purges bad memories and helps you solve problems and kind of get through some issues. But it literally is your onboard therapist that you have. And so the more REM sleep we get, the more mental, emotional therapy we get from our sleep.
I just love that. And in fact, We both learned that from a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew. What was his last name again?
I don't even remember what his last name. How about that?
Why We Sleep. It was a terrific
Yep.
book. Can't remember the poor guy's last name, but it was amazing because, yes, while you're dreaming, it really indicates that a whole bunch of stuff is going on. But I feel like it's a computer that's running scenarios. You've
Yeah.
got some things going on with your kids or your teenagers pushing your buttons, or your husband or your wife said something that bothers you, or your boss at work said something that made you feel kind of dumb. I don't know. Your brain then goes to work and it starts to run scenarios in a safe space. Yeah, thank you, Matthew Walker, Carmen.
Matthew Walker.
Yeah, and in that safe space, your brain runs these scenarios, and you wake up in the morning, and it literally is like you've had a nice free session with one of the best psychologists in the world, which is kind of like there's another amazing book called Psycho-Cybernetics, written by Maxwell Maltz. Anyone know that book? It was written in the 50s. Psycho-Cybernetics. It talks about our inner librarian. Like if you're thinking about something and you can't find the answer, like, oh, what's Matthew's last name? You can send it to your inner librarian, and in a matter of time, it'll just pop out. So the brain does these incredible scenarios, and so take advantage of that. And so good sleep gives you good dreams and productive dreams that are helping with your next day mental health. It's amazing.
That's right. It is. It is. Now, you're the phytochemical expert. So tell us about fruit and vegetable intake.
Yeah, I should have prepared more for this podcast tonight and sort of talked about phytochemicals and their direct effect on the brain. But let me just talk in generalities here. Your brain is incredibly dependent upon some of these phytochemicals. Let's just talk about their antioxidant effects. So there's a lot of in the body, you have inflammation, but sort of the step towards inflammation that's not quite inflammation yet is called oxidative stress.
Yep.
So think of oxidative stress as I don't know, you've left one of your favorite tools in the backyard, the sprinklers came on, and suddenly the shine has come off it and it's a little rusty, right? That's where oxygen can oxidize things. So oxidative stress happens. And let me give you an example. Like, how do antidepressants work? And it's so interesting that the docs talk about, oh, yes, it works this way or that way. It's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, and it's doing this and it's doing that. When it all boils down to it, because I've read a bunch of the papers, they don't really know how a lot of them work. But one thing that they figured out actually is that they act as antioxidants in the brain. Isn't that interesting? So the question is, do we need a drug to be your antioxidant in the brain to help with depression? Maybe it's the fruits and vegetables. Maybe it's the incredible cornucopia of antioxidants that you find in fruits and vegetables. And there are two major classes. Some are lipid soluble and some are water soluble. And your body, your brain, your neurons have water soluble compartments and lipid soluble. So the membranes are lipid soluble. These plant phytochemicals can deal with both parts of the cell, the water soluble, the lipid soluble. Some are even what they call amphoteric. So things like green tea catechins or some of these polyphenols, they seem to dissolve quite happily in water or lipid. So nature provides some amazing food for your brain. I kind of feel like that's how it's working. That's how, a diet that is rich in color is actually really good for your brain.
Yeah. So, Dr. Mark, you've gone a long way to convince me that maybe it's not whole foods, maybe it is fruit and vegetables. So
there you go.
I have to give it. I'm convinced. I need to increase my fruit and vegetable and not worry about whole foods so much. So
that wasn't my intention, but I love it when I can influence someone and manipulate them like that.
That's great. Now, physical activity. What do you think about physical activity?
Now, this, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, obviously this is your favorite place to go, right, Dr. Allen? Because as you sort of so nicely expressed earlier in the podcast, where you witnessed frailty that was brought about by by really, maybe there was some other pathology going on here, but basically, muscle wasting is so closely associated with frailty.
Yeah.
Um, and and I think the reason is more than just you've lost the ability. It's more than just you've lost the strength, right? Like if you
Yeah.
don't have a lot of
Yeah.
muscle, you don't have a lot of strength
Mm.
physically. But
Yeah.
I think you're going to tell us that it is much more, that muscle mass is much more than just about physical strength, much more than just about to be able to lift the grocery bags, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
that's the part that affects your brain.
Well, it is. And when you look at muscle, you know, probably within the last 10 years, we've just now started to understand that muscle is our largest endocrine organ. That means it has a massive impact on our hormones. And as we know, hormones can impact our brain health, but it's also, it has, local endocrine activity. It has systemic endocrine activity through its myokine expression, and those myokines, in this particular case with brain, we know one specific called BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor, that has a direct impact on brain health. But those myokines also impact literally every other organ system in our body and our microbiome as well. And so myokines from physical activity are very, very, very powerful. They're our body's pharmacy. We have an endogenous pharmacy that we have complete and total control to activate. And that's where a lot of us miss the boat on the importance of physical activity. We don't understand myokines, but that's not unusual. As you know, when you spoke at Berkeley a couple of weeks ago, you had 500 specialized physicians that you spoke to, and virtually none of them knew what a myokine was. That's kind of scary. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
But
This
it
is how
shows how new it is.
yeah. And, Norma Roberts was just she just said, hey, someone posted about how they're dreaming more and they're wondering why. And Norma was able to say, well, this is what dreaming does. This is really good. You're like making the most of your sleep. And my comment is like, I love that. I love that if we have information, we share it with others and we sort of open up this world.
Yeah.
30 years ago, nobody really knew what free radical biology was and what a free radical was, what an antioxidant was. And now look, nearly everyone, it's sort of part of our vocabulary. And myokines will soon be part of our vocabulary. But until it is mainstream, everyone on this podcast today, I think, can dig into it a little bit and then go share it with your friends. Like, I don't know, it doesn't matter how old they are. When you say the word myokine, they'll look at you quizzically and they'll say, "What?" And you'll say, "Oh, you didn't know about that? Like, this is so cool. The body has
Yep.
intelligence. The muscles are speaking to the bones, and the liver is talking to the heart. The brain is talking to, the muscle, and this is all through peptides and proteins that are called myokines and exokines and chemokines."
Yep. Absolutely. Now, Dr. Mark, after talking about sleep quality and then fruit and vegetable intake and physical activity, and of course, we talked about ultra processed foods and how they impact that. How does all that, in your mind, how does all that impact our mental health? And where does
Yeah,
that play into this fourth pillar?
I think probably I feel like this fourth pillar, of health called mental wellness, is probably the best example of the interconnectedness of all four of the pillars, don't you? Because
Oh, yeah.
it's such a good example of how the other three pillars impact mental health. We haven't talked about much the other direction,
Yeah.
but
Oh, it's bidirectional. Yeah.
yeah. So when you're mentally healthy, you have much more. Let's look at
Motivation.
it from the other extreme. If you are
Yeah.
depressed, sort of one of the definitions is you lose interest in your hobbies. You sleep more than usual because you don't really want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
So um, when you're mentally healthy, it gives you motivation to move, to eat better, to connect with family and friends. Like it's a burden if you are sort of stressed and if you're kind of feeling mentally unhealthy. It does
Mhm.
become a burden. Your social battery is much smaller. To me, it's the greatest example of that bidirectional sort of interdependence that we have on those 4 pillars of health.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Because when you're depressed, when you're mentally not well, not healthy, you don't feel like doing anything. And what you do eat, you typically are going to eat the highly addictive, ultra processed foods that are high in sugar, high in artificial fats. I'm going to call them artificial because they're highly processed fats. They are not fats that are found in nature. And you're not going to sleep well. But you got to ask yourself, I'm going to ask this one question for everybody. How do you feel when you don't exercise? And how do you feel when you eat a really crappy meal that's just loaded with junk? And then how do you feel when you don't get sleep? But then the other side of that is, how do you feel when emotionally you're just not motivated to do anything, right?
It
So
becomes a
it
bit of a
just,
vicious cycle, doesn't
oh,
it? A
it is.
spiral
It's
down.
a horrible cycle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so really the question is, how do you break that cycle? And I mean, let me ask you this. What would you do personally to break that vicious cycle?
It can be hard. I remember sort of
Mhm.
post-COVID. I'd had COVID. I'd had a pretty bad case. Before COVID, I was super fit. I was mountain bike racing, and then COVID happened, and it shut down our human connections.
Mhm.
It shut
Mhm.
down sometimes the ability to socialize and, all of that. And I experienced actually for the first time in my life the difficulty of sort of going back out and doing it. Um,
Yeah.
so I think it's going to be different for everyone. I don't know
Yeah.
the perfect answer, but for me, it was like start baby steps. Kind of like, I
Yeah.
don't know, I can't
Yeah.
remember that movie, Baby Steps.
Yeah.
What about Bob, right? Baby steps.
Right.
Like,
Right.
okay, I didn't sort of go back and sign up for the mountain bike race that year, the first time it was
Mhm.
available. I wasn't fit. So I started walking. I started walking with Crystal more. That gave us, not very intense physical exercise, but we were outside, we were breathing fresh air, and we were connecting. I was talking to Crystal about how'd your day go? How's your day going to go
Yeah.
today?
Yeah.
What are you doing? So baby steps, whatever it might be. And it's maybe on the food side, swapping out things. Like I stopped buying my comfort foods that are ultra high processed, right? No more Oreos. I open that pantry door and, oh, there's no Oreos. Well, I guess I've done some things to check my bad habits. So baby
Yeah.
steps.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Yeah, no, I love what you say about the emotional connection side, getting out and connecting with people and having those relationships. Relationships are so important. And you don't have to be married like we are. You can be a single person and still have very, very strong relationships as long as we take we take the steps and we take the responsibility of nurturing those relationships. I'll tell you when I was probably at my lowest it was a COVID related issue as well. And I got a massive, massive blood clot in my right leg. And that blood clot was painful. It went from my hip all the way down to my ankle. And it happened, and it was I'll call it a vaccine related injury, but I wasn't vaccinated. But I know exactly how it happened. I was exposed, and literally within 7 days, I had this massive, massive clot in my right leg. Ended up in the
Ouch.
emergency room at Baylor Scott and White Heart Hospital, and then ended up on these high powered anticoagulants. And man, it took me down. And I tell you, it took a lot of motivation from my wife. She's my biggest motivator. She kind of does like my dad. She doesn't mind telling, get up off your butt and get out in that gym and let's go work out. Or, quit sitting around moping. You don't need to do that. She'll take a little bit of control. And that's the power of those relationships and having people in your life that'll keep you moving forward. But that blood clot experience was not a good experience. But I started going to the gym, and when I started going to the gym, I have a rowing machine, and I would row, and like in the beginning, I could only row for maybe a minute or two, and I was on these blood clot, these anticoagulants, and I had no energy whatsoever. And so I just had to fight through it and fight through it, and fight through it, and fight through it. And after about 60 days, I finally hit a 10-minute row. And I was so excited, but that motivated me to keep going. And so that was a tough time.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes a
So
while. So I think that's a similar thing, right? It's baby steps. Do what you can do, make small steps. Eventually it becomes a lot, right? It's cumulative. So, and,
yeah.
you know, we don't generally think of snacking as a good thing, but we had a little meeting with our corporate group this week,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
Dr. Jones was the guest speaker, and he had the title of his talk was uh, "Exercise Snacks."
Exercise
Is that what it
snacks.
was?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exercise snacks.
And just briefly, the concept of exercise snacks.
Yeah. So an exercise snack, what it is it's basically an exercise that you can do for a minute, last anywhere from really 30 seconds up to maybe 2 or 3 minutes. It's a very, very short exercise session. And I'll give you an example, like 25 air squats. Anytime that you're setting, once an hour, just get up and do 25 air squats.
That's basically when you dip down and stand up again, right? Just dip
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
almost to a seated position or whatever's comfortable, and then stand up again.
Right. And
Pretty
and
simple.
if you've got somebody that can't do an actual squat without holding on to something, do what's called a sit stand. You sit in a chair and then you stand up. You sit down in a chair and you stand up. That's a sit stand. That's a common test that we use to detect early onset sarcopenia as well. Or you can do push-ups like Mark says, or there's all kinds of things. You can do hops, you can do arm swings, you can do trunk twist, anything that you can do for a minute or two to get blood flow and muscles contractions. And that is called an exercise snack.
Yeah. Love it. Well, we only have about 8 minutes left, and we probably don't have time to get into a really good question that we had from the Petri dish today, the Q&A, right? And
Right.
this was a question. I'll give you the question. I'll let you guys think about it during the week because we're not going to answer it today, but I think we should answer it next week because this is a fun one,
Mhm.
right? So this came from one of our really successful leaders in the company. What can someone expect at the cellular level inside the body when you start using peptides? And she's referring to natural bioactive precision peptides, right?
Yep.
What happens when you start using peptides consistently? What happens after a week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, etc.? So Dr. Allen and I said, oh my gosh, like that's almost a whole podcast right there. I love this because we've actually dug into that a little bit. So remember that question, guys. Maybe do a bit of homework and see in your own experience what you have seen when you use
Mhm.
peptides consistently. But we don't have time to answer right now, right, Dr. Allen?
Yeah, that's a 30-minute answer on its own, no
Yeah.
doubt. I think everybody's ready to go to bed anyway. So
Yeah, yeah. You know, we've been looking at we've had really good response to our podcasts, and we have noticed that, like most podcasts, about 20 minutes in, there's a little bit of a drop off. But
yeah.
we really appreciate our live audience here who hangs in right to the end because I think there's good stuff. And if for no other reason, you should hang into this last part every time because that's where we have this segment called "Talk Nerdy to Me."
That's
It's
right.
and so if you are still tuned in and you haven't left us, well, at least a 1-star review yet,
Well, then clearly your standards are as questionable as our humor is. So,
that's right. So it is time for Talk Nerdy to Me. And I thought, today, well, mental health is no joke. So I thought, let's have a little bit of fun about the difference between men and women. Because, men are less likely, I think, to really think about their mental
mhm.
health. They kind of just want to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and be tough. But I think, we're living in an age where men can be a little bit vulnerable, but there is still a big difference between men and women. So we
Yeah.
thought, oh man, I went to Facebook and I saw some really cool memes, right? So
I
let me
think I'll
describe this first one.
yeah.
There's a man. If you're live, you can see the picture here. The man's laying in bed and he's holding his heart and he's looking sorry for himself and he's wearing sort of a hospital gown. And wife is there with her pink shirt and a bouquet of flowers. And she says, "You must get some rest. You must be exhausted after doing the washing up," meaning the dishes, right?
Oh, how funny. How about this one, Dr. Mark? apparently there are two types of flu: the harmless one that women and children get, and the near-death version that men get.
So true, isn't it? I've heard that it's called
That's,
like a man flu or something like that.
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, we
The
can
man
be
flu is
sooks.
bad.
We can be sooks. Okay, the next one's a little risque. So put the kids to bed. There's a picture here of this scantily clad, beautiful woman, and husband is laying next to her, looking very amorous. And she says, "You're honestly the worst I've ever had in bed." And the man says, "You can't judge that in less than a minute."
I have to say, I think this is a nice change from the dad jokes. Although these are dad jokes, no doubt. Oh my gosh. How about this one? I'm returning these glasses I bought for my husband. He's still not seeing things my way.
Yeah, that's a good one. The lady's returning glasses. The guy in the optometrist shop is a man, and he's looking at her like, "What?"
What? Oh my gosh.
Okay, the next one is really polarizing. So apologies in advance here. There's a picture. There's a cute picture of two penguins. There's a pink penguin and a black and white penguin. So I'm guessing one with the ribbon is a girl. And the statement here is, the relationship between a husband and wife is psychological. One is psycho and the other is logical. I'll let you decide which one is which. Okay, guys?
I'm not even commenting on that one.
Well, as you
Oh
know,
my
we are
gosh.
a legit bona fide podcast now. We are sponsored by Make Wellness, but we're on iHeartRadio, Amazon, Spotify, Apple Music, and we do need now to recognize officially some of our staff and sponsors. So first of all, let's recognize our assistant makeup artist, Gladys Radio.
How about our assistant director of strategic planning, Kent C.D. Trees?
Can't see the forest for the trees. Thank you, Kent. Really appreciate your good work. We have a French assistant disciplinarian, and his name is Joaquin de Planck. Well, that's some pretty good discipline right there.
That is. And how about our assistant fleet manager, Lisa Carr?
Oh, Lisa Carr. She's our fleet manager. Yep. You have to do that every month when you come visit us, don't you? So thank you, Lisa. Well, you've done it again. You spent another hour with us. You chose science over scrolling, cell signals over cat videos, and thank goodness, peptides over procrastination.
Well, now it's time for you guys to go make a difference.
Yep,
Get back with
that.
a person. Yep. Get back with the person that got you on the call. Make sure that you come see us next week, because next week we got a really, really special show, don't we, Dr. Mark?
Absolutely. So you're going to want to come in next week and tune in. Next week, we're going to get really serious. It's going to be all about peptides next week. It's going to be all about GLP-1, right? We're going to talk about the difference between GLP-1, the one that you've all heard about, and the GLP-1 that your body makes.
Yep. The good, the bad, and the ugly. We're going to get to it
ugly?
all.
I thought it was all beautiful.
Well, it depends on who you listen to, right?
Yep. So after next week's podcast, you guys are going to be some of the most educated people in the space. It's really highly relevant right now. So we look forward to seeing you all next week.
Yeah, absolutely. So get back with the person that got you on the call. Unless you got the people on the call, then get back with your people. But guys, come back and see us next week. Go leave us a review. We need reviews. We had some idiot give us a bad review, and we need to crunch that, didn't we, Dr. Mark?
How dare they? That's right.
Dare
they told us we talked too much about peptides, which I thought was pretty funny. But,
oh my gosh. Anyway, you guys have a great week, and we will see you next week. Same time, same place.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.